This is Human Sexuality and Better Understanding It. This is the textbook that we will be using. If you so choose to buy the book, that is the numbers you need to look up. Published in 2010. This basically says that this textbook is written in the form that is going to work with you. It is written so that it's something that you can use, not something that is written in a quote-unquote textbook fashion that is just straightforward facts. This is stuff that people will actually say and do to each other. And it's more of a sociology than it is a factual thing when it comes to the emotional end of it, but it also does have the facts. Basically, what this is saying is that people who do have sex and people who want to learn about sex don't only learn for themselves, but are able to make more thoughtful and more expressive thoughts towards their partner and have more fulfilling sexual lives. So the more you learn, the better you are, basically. This is a theme about the book, basically stating that if you are immature or you have different kinds of risks that you take, then you are going to get various diseases. This book does not stop you from obtaining any STI or things like that, which the STIs are normally formed as STDs, but we'll get into that later. The abstinence-only sex education was started in the early 1980s. There was sex education before then, but it wasn't organized, and the sex education that was basically sometimes the gym teacher or a random person off the street that would go into either a classroom or a room full of boys or girls and basically throw them a bunch of information that they often had misquoted and no facts behind it based on their own sexual experiences. And the sexual education was sparse, if any, before that time. But when it did start in the 1980s, what happened was that they only used the scare tactics of showing nasty pictures of STDs, STIs now known as, and they tried to scare children into not having sex. That didn't help. What ended up happening was the percentage of children that got pregnant skyrocketed, and people were like, well, they're getting sex education. Well, I don't understand why. Well, it's because this doesn't work, and they were never taught how to prevent STIs and STDs or prevent pregnancies. They were only told, don't do it. And this paragraph here basically states what I just said. The information that people do know about sex, like before 1980, before the scare tactics, and even after 1980, they were getting the information from the wrong places. Your buddies know just as much about sex as you do, and very rarely would children or young adults go to their families or parents or older people about this. So the information about sex was not exactly accurate, what they were getting. And TV shows and books and magazines and things like that. And now the internet grossly doesn't explain what sex actually is. And the problem is that boys are getting a lot of their information from pornography off the internet for free. And all pornography does is degrade women and show them as submissive. And it's the hands-free sex. Meaning what happens is that the men, to get a better shot of the penis entering the vagina, have to put their hands behind their back and thrust into the woman, who is usually in a very uncomfortable position, in order to get the best camera shot of the thrusting in and out of the vagina. Or I should say orifice, because it's not always a vagina. It could be any hole that the woman possesses. And the men and boys who watch this tend to lose their imaginations, the imagination of normal sexual activities is seen like in this photo, where there is caressing, there is touching, it's in the right setting, it's in the right time, everything is in this perfect moment of ecstasy where both the man and the woman are getting pleasure from it. and there is no pressure to thrust and to have intercourse for hours on end. It's not seen like that when we are young, before we start watching pornography and we start losing our imagination when it comes to sex. This is an example of how sex education can differ depending on the content that is taught. In China, they do talk about STIs and they do talk about abstinence, but they also include how not to get pregnant. And they do this because of the One Child Act in China. And because of that, the sex of teenagers, and even though it still does occur in China, the number of teenagers getting pregnant is almost zero. It's not quite, but it is very close to it, because that is the only child that they are allowed to have. So they are very educated on when and how to have safe sex so that they don't end up pregnant. And even on street corners, like in this photo here, they sell condoms everywhere. And in some places they even give them away for free. A little note on parenting, that parents who, now this is 2015, parents who had sexual education as children are more likely to speak to their own children about their own sexual education experiences and their own sexual encounters. But the information, again, is usually outdated and or wrong. So unless they have a current book, which there are now hundreds of books out. Moving down to the table. These are different things that women and men discuss with their children about sex, and how many, the percentage-wise of each topic that is spoken. There's a wide view. There we go. This is an advocacy part of the book, basically stating that people who take college courses, sexual classes, and it doesn't matter what kind of sexual classes, but it has to be college level, because anything before that, again, the information is, unless it's given by a doctor, is not very accurate. And even then, doctors sometimes, depending on the materials they use, cannot be accurate. But this is just an advocacy of things that is good that people learn, and the positives and the negatives that people learn from sexual education. A little bit about the Kinsey Report. The Kinsey Report was a survey done by these 4 men. Later, this report was adaptation into a film in 2004. There is the film dictation of it, a picture of it anyways. Basically, what ended up happening was, because this was a survey, the people in the surveys, yet even though that they were more reliable because they did not put their names or any identifications on it, it was only sent to people who like taking personal surveys and things of that nature. So it was outgoing A-type personality people, and there's nothing wrong with those type of people, but that's not everybody. So the findings, even though that they were accurate for A-class type of people, were said to be for everybody, and that's not the case. It's not for everybody. It's only for extroverts and people who like authority and power and things of that nature, which, again, there's nothing wrong with it, but that leaves out all the shy people and the people that are regular working class, and not the entire population, which is the way that the report read. So that was just one discrepancy, but overall the report was a big milestone, because it showed that people like sex and that sex was normal and healthy to have, not just for procreation but for pleasure. As seen here, this picture is of Johnson & Johnson, but Johnson & Johnson are a married couple. It is not the Johnson & Johnson that has all of the medical supplies like Band-Aids and other products. So this couple is a very important set of doctors, because they actually observe people having sex. What they would do is they would have various people come in to their lab, and they would watch them start any sexual acts and finish all the way to the conclusions. They did everything from petting to foreplay to getting them into a mood, but they were being watched vigorously behind a glass window, and they were not allowed to leave the room until they had finished having sex. All of the couples were married, and basically, yeah, so this was on what they consider sexual healthy relationships in the bedroom in a private setting, but it wasn't. So the results were a little skewed, and they found a lot of good things, but the information was not what they expected. So this is not just a survey. This is why it's so important, but in actual watching people have sex. And yeah, you can get paid to do that, apparently. So when there is sexual research done, these are the things that you have to have in order to have a proper and ethical research done. To measure the sexual activities, these are actual products that they used during the test of the people that showed up to their clinic. The ring thing would go around the penis, and it would measure the girth of the penis as it enlarged and how many thrusts it made while penetrating the vagina and things of that nature. And that was a tube that was inserted into the vagina that the penis would, it would measure the wetness of the vagina and how big it expanded and things of that nature. And both of these would be on the male and the female while they're having intercourse. So it could, I guess, see as uncomfortable. I have not been through a research study, so I don't know, but this is the very first type of research tools that they had. So that's all for this lesson. Thanks for watching. Next will be Chapter 2.